You had a letter from a young lady, I think her last name is Wilson, that you might have questions about. And so it prompted me to add to my list the subject of radar. It's probably in your box out here, your mailbox out here.
A letter.
Yeah, a real letter. It comes with snail mail. Okay. There have been a number of meetings about the radar system since the effort last fall, I guess, that came fairly late in the process to understand both what the ridership was willing to do and what the local governments were willing to do. And as a result of that, Covington and Alleghany County offered to continue their current level of funding and provide matching funds up to $10,000 for any fundraising that occurred within the area. They were not willing, Radar was not willing at that time to increase the fare from 50 cents to $1, even though that was a recommendation of the local governments that were involved. And our experience was that we had many people saying they were willing to pay that extra 50 cents. This year, the process has started very differently. The local government people insisted that we needed to have some type of a study of our system. DRPT, which is Department of Rail and Public Transportation, actually came in and funded a shortfall in the program for the current year, which is the current fiscal year, agreed to hire a consultant. I and others met the consultant last week, who's going to be doing a study that both is through survey work, actually people riding the buses to see who gets on, who gets off, how often people use it, with the idea of trying to see what level of service we can have with existing funding. It's not as though they are suggesting that more money be added to the effort. At the same time, we have asked the Regional Planning District Commission to work on looking at are there ways to improve other services for transportation in our area. And one suggestion that I offered and that they were going to study was the idea that once the train station opens in Roanoke, and you probably know that today, 7 days a week, they run a shuttle bus from the Civic Center. Actually, it starts in Blacksburg, from Virginia Tech to the Roanoke Civic Center to the Lynchburg station, twice a day in order to facilitate people using the train out of Lynchburg to go to D.C. I had suggested that perhaps that bus could be rerouted from Clifton, Forge, Alleghany, Highlands to Roanoke once it was no longer needed for that other route, with the idea that it would connect the two train stations as well as provide an opportunity for people to have transportation between this area and Roanoke. And with the construction going on in the near future on 220, as well as the increase in job opportunities that will be unfolding in the Daleville, Botetourt County area, it seemed to me an ideal time to look at commuter service. They were in the process, or are in the process, of undertaking that study. I was pleased to hear when several of us went to the first Go Virginia meeting from William Fralin, who's on the State Commission for Transportation, that they are in fact looking at that possibility, realizing that that type of service may be needed. Of course, if you picked up the paper, you've read that Amtrak is on the chopping block as well. I did get a phone call from a member of the board of directors of Amtrak last week or week before last, wanting to make sure that, number one, I knew that we were on the list to be eliminated, and number two, to ask what we were doing about the potential loss in service. And you've probably read what my comments were that Daryl Gleason reported. But even with all of that, I think we need to continue to look at ways to both remind people that we have Amtrak service here in Clifton Forge, and particularly that we have the western route that goes to Chicago and beyond, because the route that will connect Roanoke with Lynchburg is the eastern route, which will go to Washington, New York, Boston, but won't have that good connection to the Chicago area. Long story, this lady has written you all asking for a $10,000 donation. The Radar organization has not asked the town for anything. This woman, evidently, from what I've been told, was part of the group that started many, many years ago, probably almost 20 years ago now, the Radar system here, and took a lead role when there appeared to be a deficit in the funding for the current year, and actually went to organizations to get some funding to match those $10,000 match offers that Covington and Alleghany put forward. But at a budget meeting that we had, and I was invited to it probably 2 months ago, the two jurisdictions said that they would put in their budgets for next fiscal year the same amounts that they were funding this year. And no request was made of the town. In my opinion, this woman's coming in the 11th hour asking for something that I don't see as sanctioned by the Radar organization itself. But I did want you all to receive your letters. She sent me one. She sent individual ones to all members of council. I don't know if she'll make contact with you. But requests for funding from the town to the town had to be in by the end of February. And as I said to you earlier, we're very close to balancing a budget, and then this came just earlier this week.
So what's this in this budget?
She's wanting, I'm sure.
So a meeting you attended where Covington and the county were asked for a certain amount of money, you were asked for nothing.
That's correct.
And this lady that we're right now, from what you said, has no affiliation with them.
She has been a fundraiser for them and was evidently one of the originators of the service, or getting the service 20-some years ago. But
if the original group would have wanted to ask for Covington and Alleghany, they didn't ask us, right?
And she says in that letter very clearly that she understands we've not been asked for a donation in many years. She makes that, and again, there are so many I don't know how you say that. Incorrect pieces of information floating around that I just don't know how to even begin to address. But back when there was a lot of fervor around the whole issue of Radar, people were saying that we should make a contribution, that we'd been asked every year, and I kept telling people, because we checked records, we had not made a contribution since the time that we reverted from city to town status. Radar never denied what I said, but there were people walking around saying that, it was an inaccurate statement. I had a gentleman come in here today and tell me that our water bill was going to go to $140 a month, and I said, I don't know where in the world you heard that, but there's no truth in that, nothing like that.
I received 2 phone calls at $125.
Well, people just say anything, and I guess if you throw it up against the wall and it sticks, then that becomes reality, but it's not.
It would be reality if we raised it to $140.
Yes.
So we'd be out of line in doing what Covington and the county did and guarantee them we'll give them what we gave them last year?
That's a good idea, Bob.
Well, she says here that she has got increased comp from the county and Covington.
She did not.
That's what she said.
Well, what they did was they agreed to match this last. Yes.
She said with this funding coupled with increased commitments from Alleghany and Covington, and a 50-cent to $1 fare raise.
Well, that was the other interesting thing that came out of the budget meeting.
They are going to raise the fare?
Well, that was the other interesting piece of it. Radar indicated that was a local government decision. And so it would be raised to $1, which is what we asked for last year, and they refused.
What local government are they blaming for that? Us or the county?
Well, last year the county and Covington put forth a response to Radar that recommended the increase to $1. Radar refused to accept that recommendation.
And that's 20 years later.
But now they are saying they understand that the local governments want it to go to $1, and that's part of what's being expected.
And I agree that we should match what we matched last year. I'll say it again.
What's AHATS?
Earlier in there, it's got a name to it. I think I circled it, didn't I? It's a long name. Alleghany. Highlands Alternative.
Oh, Alleghany Highlands Area Transportation System.
Right.
Okay.
So, long story, because you all got a letter, I wanted you to know that we did not receive a request. There was no understanding in the meetings that I've been in that we would get a request from Radar. If there were requests, it should come from Radar, not from this side group, which is kind of a committee versus the organization.
Yep.
But she did take the trouble and time to write each of you individually, and I didn't think that
I never received anything.
it's probably in here in your
It's
outbox
probably
here.
In your file.
Because I think they're mailed all here. They all came at the same
Yeah, they
day.
came addressed.
So when you go out tonight, if you just
Oh,
pick it up,
of course.
yeah.